People who have slept with their boss for a promotion or a raise, was it worth it? My dad is the boss of a mid-sized company, and he hired this girl a couple of years back who was quite young and attractive, and seemingly thought she could use her appeal to get a promotion. She started coming on to him, and he made it really clear he wasn't interested. He was very happily married, and she was 36 years his junior. He thought it was weird and creepy. The girl wouldn't take no for an answer. It started off as really outright flirting, looking for excuses to touch him, wearing inappropriate outfits to work. The office has a strict dress code for employees, and she was definitely breaking it. One day she showed up in a very transparent, men's white shirt with no pants, and nothing underneath. Another time she wore a provocative Halloween costume on a day that wasn't anywhere near Halloween, and other such behaviors that whilst annoying and weird were harmless. Then she started to send him really explicit emails and pictures of herself, feeling him as he walked past her, trying to kiss him, etc. He ended up firing her on the grounds of SA. A few weeks later, there was an office party, and she showed up and somehow got him alone, climbed on his lap and told him she'd do anything to get her job back, and started to unbutton his pants. He pushed her away, told her he wasn't interested, and if she tried anything like this again he'd call the police. She told him that she was never interested in an old prick like him anyway, that the only reason she had tried to seduce him was to get a promotion, and that any guy would be lucky to have me. You must be a total dummy to turn this down. A few weeks later a similar thing happened. She showed up at an event she wasn't invited to and tried to have her way with him in order to regain her job. He called the police. They charged her with SA, and she got off on community service but would be registered as a S offender. Then it got really scary. She started showing up at our house, threatening my family, saying my dad had ruined her life and that she was going to make him pay. One day we came home to find her undressed in my parents' bed. On another, she showed up at my school claiming she was my mother and needed to take me to an appointment. Luckily the receptionist knew my mother and told her to leave, wouldn't let her get anywhere near me. We called the police again and they took her into custody, and then to a hospital where she is now receiving mental treatment. Moral of the story: don't try to do your boss if they're not interested. Seriously, it's not going to end well for anyone. Story 2. I was the boss and I was sleeping with my employee. It didn't start out as the kind of story you'd expect to have a happy ending. She was, to put it bluntly, not the star of the team. Her work performance was, let's say, uninspired. She struggled with alcohol, often showed up late with hair dripping wet like she just dived out of bed, and sported dark circles under her eyes that could rival a raccoon's. Things changed when we started sleeping together. I think she realized that if she didn't step up her game, it might raise some eyebrows when she wasn't shown the door. And step up she did, almost overnight. Suddenly, she was punctual, prepared, and putting out work so good it made me question my own performance. She didn't just meet expectations, she shattered them. In just a few weeks, she became the model employee. She received several lateral promotions within a few months. One I had a hand in, strictly above board, I swear, and another entirely on her own merit. She was thriving and frankly, it was impressive to watch. Our relationship continued, and we dated for over a year while I was still her boss. Eventually, we both realized that working together while dating wasn't sustainable, so we started looking for new opportunities. Luckily, we both landed better jobs with higher pay, and we left the company on good terms. Fast forward a few years. We're still together, living under the same roof, and now engaged. What started as a messy workplace romance turned into a partnership built on love and growth, for both of us. Life has a funny way of working out. Story 3. I'll admit it, I had a relationship with my supervisor at work. In my line of work, which is about half field work, meeting people outside the job can be pretty tough. So, when I ended up spending a lot of time with this great guy, smart, passionate about his hobbies, and, yes, my supervisor, it was hard not to be drawn to him. It started innocently enough. One day, he asked if I wanted to go rock climbing, and that quickly became our thing, a few evenings a week. A few weeks later, I was exhausted and starving but too wiped out to cook, so as a joke, I asked, "What's on the menu tonight?" To my surprise, he didn't laugh it off. He invited me over and made me an incredible meal. That night turned into an unforgettable evening, which turned into an amazing week, and then months of something truly special. We eventually broke up because I had to move away for work, but the time we shared left a lasting impression. Now, let me clarify a few things. I didn't get a promotion or a raise out of the relationship. I did, however, stay on for the entire duration of the project, one of only 3 geologists from the original 12. But honestly, I think that was down to my productivity, which was higher than anyone else's. If I did get an advantage from the relationship, it was the support. When I found myself between jobs, he reached out to his network, helping me find new opportunities. It's rare to have someone in your corner like that, and I'm grateful for it. At the end of the day, the relationship wasn't about power or perks, it was about connection. And for that, I have no regrets. Story 4. When I was in college, I worked at a pretty large movie theater in my area. It was a lot like a restaurant in the sense that everyone is banging everyone and partying most nights together. We had this ridiculously cute manager, probably around 30. She was pretty strict with us, which made sense because we were a bunch of overconfident college seniors who thought we were way cooler than we actually were. Anyway, I hooked up with her after a party and it was great. We became friends with benefits. Since she was in charge of the time clock, she'd sometimes clock me in a couple of hours early on slow days, so I was getting paid for full-time work while only showing up about 20 hours a week. It was the dream college job. She'd also have me stay late to clean up after late shows, which, in reality, meant sneaking into the regional manager's office where we banged. It was the only place without cameras, and because the regional manager was a fear-mongering biss. Story 5. I did it with my manager so I could become a full-time waitress. When I started working at my current job, I was a hostess. Eventually I was able to wait tables part-time, but still, most of my hours were for shifts as a hostess, which only paid minimum wage. I kept pestering the GM and AMs to be made a full-time waitress, but there just weren't enough shifts at the time. One day, my general manager announced that he was leaving to open a new restaurant in another state, not part of our small chain, but an entirely different franchise. He then pulled me aside for a private chat. He told me he wanted to make sure I was promoted to full-time server before he left, and I was absolutely thrilled. Then he asked if I'd like to discuss it further at his house that night. Without hesitation, I said, absolutely. When I got to his place, I realized right away that there was a total quid pro quo type of thing in the works. Yes, he'd make sure I officially became a full-time waitress. He promised that while stroking my thigh, though, and that's when I realized what was happening. Yes, I did it. Keep in mind, I never felt threatened or pressured. I wanted the promotion. He wanted to bang, and I was okay with that. Did it make me feel a little dirty? Definitely. But it was actually a really fun night that I don't regret. Was it worth it? Absolutely. At the time I was barely able to pay my bills. I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. In the 2+ years since, I've managed to save a pretty decent amount of money. When it's not killing me, I like the work too. But if I'd had to wait for that promotion, especially after that GM left, it would have probably been months before I became a full-time waitress. There's no way I would have been able to manage that, and I'd have probably ended up getting a different job. So yeah, I was happy with the result. Story 6. Maybe mine doesn't count, but I was the boss that banged one of my employees. To be fair, she was hot as F, and I had known her since I was 5. We started kindergarten together. I had encouraged her to take the job, and we had a relationship prior on some level, though nothing really serious. We had lost our V cards together early on, but it wasn't a relationship deal. She did get a huge amount of preferential treatment, but even if she didn't F me, she was a superior employee. Nice perk. She had the first pick on hours and had first pick of assignments. We didn't hide our relationship. No staff complained, save for one girl that already hated me. My employee F-buddy was well liked because she enjoyed taking the hard assignments, and she's so genuinely sweet nobody could really dislike her. Yes, she banged me, but everyone was banging everyone there. We were young. I left the job because I was just overworking there, and started doing several part-time jobs, so the week wasn't one monotonous blur anymore. One job I had was janitorial. So guess who applied at my janitorial job? My spicy ex-employee. This time she was the manager. I banged my boss like crazy. She took the job because she knew I was there. She promoted me to full-time assistant manager the month she got settled in. We are married now. Several of our ex-employees/coworkers attended the wedding. 2 were in the wedding party. 16 years. We work well together, but we both took different career paths. We no longer get to have midday romps save for the weekend. Yesterday was particularly nice though. She was off work before noon. Worth it. Story 7. Currently sleeping with my boss. We work at a bar. He manages and I cocktail waitress. He's working on his mechanical engineering degree, eventually, and looking for a new job, and I just got out of active duty, so this is both a temporary job for us and we'll both be quitting within the next year. Aside from a free meal while on my shift, usually we get 50% off, but he just comps it. I haven't really gotten extra benefits. Obviously, I'm only dating him for the free meals. And for the D, been dating for 3 months now. Story 8. I can tell you what happened when I didn't sleep with my boss. She was my supervisor, in her 50s, though she insisted she was in her 40s, and honestly, she could almost pull it off because she looked great for her age. Of course, we'd seen her personnel records, so the secret was out. She was a huge flirt and immature. She was married and I had just gotten married, the latter being my main reason for begging off instead of getting off. Anyway, we were out at an informal Christmas party with coworkers that ended up an after-hours party at one of the employees' house. Lots of drinking. As it wrapped up, she, my boss, said she needed someone to follow her home, underscoring that her husband was out of town. She was clearly aiming the request at me. I made a lame excuse and she was clearly disappointed. Luckily, a fellow employee stepped up and offered to follow her as his home was in that direction. The aftermath is I was denied a promotion for years despite other people, including a guy who did bang her, getting raises on a regular basis. I eventually had to go over her head and she grudgingly signed off on it. Story 9. Girl just returned home from being an air hostess for a few years. Got a job at my work, telecustomer services. Everyone bangs everyone in CS. She was school friends with my boss, so we saw a lot of each other. We got on well, started sleeping with each other. She moved into her own home and asked me if I'd join her. Foolishly, I said yes. 6 months later, using her connection with her friend in the company, she got a promotion and new job role in training and HR, tiny bit more money, but more importantly, she was now my boss. You can see where this is heading. Another 6 months later, we started to have some issues and agreed that we should work at it. It was, for my part, the fact that we were together 24 hours a day made me feel a little suffocated. From her point of view, I wasn't ambitious enough. She told me to go for jobs I didn't want to do in the company because it looks better for us. Anyways, a little resisting her urges for company promotion and my own plan to go to university part-time, to study for my dream job, everything seemed to get better. Then, it stopped being better. We drifted even though we were still together constantly, and after deciding to give it one last go, she dropped a cannonball on me. She told me she had been sleeping with not only her boss but with the company director and a coworker. I asked how she could do this. It boiled down to that she did it because she wanted to, without regard for me, just to progress her career. Rest assured, my world crumbled. I was embarrassed at so many things. Being cheated on by your GF is one thing. Being cheated on by the person you share a home with is another. Being cheated on by a coworker is something too. But being cheated on by your boss with members of the same company? After we broke up, I tried to continue working at the same place. But it became very clear that she wanted me gone and twice went to her boss to find a way to get rid of me. I found this out from our mutual friend years later. I couldn't take it anymore and quit. I went numb for 4 years after that. Went to that bottom of that barrel everyone talks about. I was low, very low. I felt completely lost and alone with my troubles. I had no idea where to go, what to do, and thinking like this was just my fault to deal with it. I lost a good job and a bad girlfriend. I gained around 100 pounds. I cloistered up socially. I thought that I was weak to need help for feeling a bit down, that this is something you can't ask for help to deal with, no one cares. This went on for years. I remember genuinely thinking that everyone around me would have their life improved if I was simply dead. I was diagnosed with depression and social anxiety with tendencies. But things are getting better for me. I've lost 84 pounds of the 100 pounds I put on in the last 18 months. I have re-signed up to finish my degree in September of next year. I volunteer regularly at a local mental health charity that helped me during my problems. Anyways, I just realized how much I typed, so I'll end it here. Don't sleep with anyone you work with. It can't only potentially ruin your job, it can ruin your life. Story 10. It was well worth the raise. Since my SO and I were both fresh out of college with insane college debts to pay off, we both knew that our basically minimum wage jobs were probably not going to take us where we needed to be. My boss had been hitting on me for a while, and I didn't think anything of it until I talked about it with my SO. He joked, "It's too bad you can't sleep with the boss," and I replied that it wasn't actually a bad idea. It's not that the boss is an attractive man or anything, although he looks quite similar to my SO, but we had already talked about how being physically exclusive was not the focal point of our relationship. We love each other for who we are and trust each other enough to go through with things like this. I ended up cryptically replying to his suggestions, eventually highlighting up the offer to have with him if he doubled my pay. He complied. I can't say I feel positively or negatively about it, because it hardly seemed like a personal decision to me. I feel detached from the whole situation. I did what I needed to do to get paid and it worked out. My SO feels the same way. Story 11. Kinda the other way around. I slept with one of the girls that worked for me. I was in a relationship at the time and this gorgeous, smart, funny girl started working for me. We really hit it off as friends and we started messaging each other, initially work-related. Our messages became more personal and we began to really connect as friends. Then one night my colleague was out with her friend for dinner and invited me along for drinks. We headed to this nightclub and began to drink vodka by the bottle, big mistake, and ended up confessing our feelings to each other. We left the club together and knew what we were doing was wrong, so decided to go separate ways home. By the time I got home I had a missed call. I called her back, and we met in the city where we sat and talked until the early hours. She invited me to go back to hers as temperatures had really dropped. I said yes, and we made our way there holding hands and talking. When I got to hers we lay next to each other on the sofa and talked all night. Nothing happened. The next morning was awkward and I went back to mine feeling very confused. A couple of days later we were at a work night out and the pattern repeated as we went back to hers and talked all night. The next morning she kissed me and we slept together again and again and again. I felt like crap for what I had done, but I couldn't help but feel happy at the same time. I broke it off with my girlfriend, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I now realize that I am completely in love with this girl and we are currently looking for a place to live together. Work got pretty awkward as people realized what had happened and my now girlfriend left for another venture. Story 12. I had a summer job working for the local government. I worked in a department filled with stereotypical middle-aged office women. You know the type. They shower in J.C. Penney perfume while caking on as much makeup as they can like it's some sort of competition. Then they come into work for an hour or two so they can gossip and eat the rest of the day. Anyways, I was basically told to file random crap while they asked me about my life and what I did outside of work, but all weird and creepy. Like they would ask me about my weekend on Wednesdays, so I never knew if they were talking about the previous weekend or the one coming up. Then the not-so-subtle queries about my love life would come up randomly. I usually deflected these pretty well. Yet there was this one lady who happened to be the boss of the department who was not really subtle at all. She started hitting on me in the most awkward ways possible. Keep in mind I was 20, and this was a summer job, so there was no room for advancement or raise. Close to the end of the summer she flat out asked if I wanted to sleep with her for a recommendation and a raise if I came back next summer. You get a raise every year you come back. I wasn't that stupid. I did not do it. Story 13. Male here. I had slept with a professor when I was 20. She was 42. It wasn't for an A, but I got one to my own credit. I was a good student. It was nice having an experienced woman to sleep with. We had a brief relationship and then ended things when the semester was over. Was it worth it? Yes and no. Things were rough with my then girlfriend, so I very incredibly regrettably cheated on her. Lowest moment of my life. Even though we're not together and haven't been for about 7 years, I still live with guilt. The guilt was not worth it. Also, at alumni/reunion events, there is always an awkward conversation. Professor was also an alumna. But a lot of good came of it. I stopped questioning my self-worth pretty much then and there. I thought my girlfriend was as good as it got, and it wasn't good. And I realized that, despite being a scumbag, I obviously have attractive qualities about me. Attractive enough for a professor to jeopardize her career to sleep with a student. I never had mind-blowing love-making before, and a fit 42-year-old can provide it after a long life of experience. That was nice. TLDR, professor gave me an A. I gave her the D. It was worth it in some ways, but not worth it in other ways. Story 14. My best friend and roommate, separate rooms. In college slept with her boss. She worked as a receptionist at a law firm. He was a freaking creep. She was 18. He was in his 40s. He wasn't cute or nice. He moaned like a girl and it was disgusting to hear. I always lectured her about it, but she did get a lot of perks. For example, he would pay for everything including giving her $100 bills nearly every time they met up. He would buy her lunch every day at work. It was pretty much a sugar daddy situation. Long story short, one day he came to the apartment and started banging on the door, yelling. She wasn't home and I did not answer it. He found her on a dating website, a sugar daddy one, and became furious. Fortunately, he left that time, but we ended up calling the police because he was threatening her. He went to jail for some crap, and I moved out shortly after that. We're still good friends though. Story 15. I've never actually told anyone about this before, so here it goes. A few years ago, I was 19, it was my first summer home after college, and I took a job as a lifeguard at my town's pool. The owner of the pool, let's call him John, who was often there running the front office himself, was a pretty handsome man for his age, I would say 45 or so. I had known him for several years as I had been a lifeguard at the same pool for a couple years in high school, and my high school swim team used to practice at his pool. So you could say I knew him decently well, I suppose, though he hadn't known me as an adult until I took the job this time. Anyway, he would subtly flirt with me here and there after I started, telling me what great shape I was in, that he thought blondes were the prettiest, etc. I didn't really think much of it, since I got a lot of similar attention at college, and hell, he was a handsome man anyway. A couple weeks after I started, he threw a party at his house. Well, he called it a party, but it was more of a quiet hang/shindig with about 5 to 6 of my coworkers. My brother was borrowing my car for the weekend to go on a camping trip several hours away, so I asked John if I could get a ride there and back. It was all good fun and we got pretty hammered. After everyone left, he advised us to just hang out for a while until he sobered up and could drive me home. I guess that was just his way of getting me to stay, though, in hindsight. We were hanging on the couch together having a good time, just chatting about funny things that had happened at work, when he told me there was a way I could earn more money. I asked what he meant and he didn't even say anything, just basically looked at me in a way that hinted what he was talking about. I thought, well, I'm having fun, and he's a pretty handsome guy anyway, so what the hell. So I gave him a blowy. Shortly after, he drove me home. The next day I was feeling really uneasy about it and nervous. What would it be like the next time I saw him, etc. Well, I went to work the following Monday and it was fine. I don't know if one or both of us were just being fake, but we smiled and did our business as normal and didn't mention what had happened. Fast forward a few days to Thursday, which was our payday. We got paid weekly, and I see there is a $40 extra pay to my name. It had never been there before. It seemed he had made good on his word to give me more money. And by the way, when you're 19, $40 extra on your paycheck seems like a lot. The next day John invited me over to his house, just me and him. I didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, but I was totally into coming over, because I could use the extra money and I didn't mind because of his good looks. We hung out and had a few beers and chatted, and long story short, we went up to his bedroom and shagged. It was the wildest shagging I had ever had, and it was wonderful. The following Monday when I got to work, there was an envelope with my name on it, with $150 in it. We continued to shag every weekend, and I continued to earn tons of extra money. He even convinced me to try the backdoor for my first time, offering me a substantial bonus for it. Substantial turned out to be $300. The last weekend of summer, his younger, even hotter brother came in and they shared some time with me. I went back to school and arranged for my final paycheck to be mailed to my college address, and I had a paycheck item on there for $500. Story 16. I didn't sleep with my boss for a raise. This is more of a cautionary tale. My would-be boss met me at my then lunch place. We got to talking and it turns out I had all the qualifications he was looking for a job at an amazing company. I kinda got the feeling he had a crush on me, but we always kept it professional and only met to discuss the job. I was not attracted to him and never lead him to believe such. Eventually he hired me for my dream job and I worked from home for about 2 months before moving to the area where company headquarters was located. The week before I moved, he came down to my area to work and we got lunch on a Sunday afternoon. I was feeling very comfortable with him and my role, so I let my guard down and we had ourselves a Sunday fun day. I do not have a high tolerance for alcohol and blacked out. The next morning I woke up with soreness between my legs, unclothed with my boss in my bed. When I told my roommate what happened, she was shocked because she said I had put myself to bed and passed out almost as soon as we got back. She assumed my boss had shown himself out. Story 17. Not my boss, but I'm sleeping with my boss's daughter. My boss knows about us and has yet to say anything or treat either of us differently. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I'm a very good and loyal employee there, so I think he knows it'd be a bad business decision to fire me based off of an emotional standpoint rather than a rational one. I think the only real consequence I've experienced would be that there have been times where I've been over for dinner and my boss has said, "Oh, I'm adding you on the schedule for tomorrow at 6 a.m. as we're leaving." It's usually on a Friday or Saturday night when he knows her and I are probably going straight from dinner with her parents to the bar or out to a club with some of our other coworkers. Just as a little FU because he knows he can't fire me simply on the basis of dating his daughter, who just so happens to work there as well. We've been dating for 3 months now and I know they tell you to never poop where you eat, but I would do it all over again. If anything, I feel like it's brought me closer to my boss. He's a totally different guy at home, funny and just a simple guy who watches football every Sunday. Not that I don't like him at the job. He's respectful and the type of person who's a leader, not just a boss. I'm not sure if it actually is helping, but it feels like he's getting exposed to the real me, not just the work me. Seeing what kind of person I am all the time, so I'm gonna keep on dating his daughter because she's hot as they come, and I like her. Story 18. I'm just a little cashier at a popular convenience store. I was very surprised at all the boning employees were having with the supervisors. There was one girl in particular who shagged with several employees and supervisors. Mind you that nobody ever slept with the top manager of our store. It was only the supervisors. There was one supervisor in particular that had slept with several employees. That one girl I mentioned earlier did it with this supervisor for a promotion. It worked. She got the position she wanted. However, an older lady thought the supervisor was attractive. She wanted some D for herself, not for a promotion, just for pleasure. It got worse when a girl who just turned 18 wanted to shag with this supervisor. It got so bad that the supervisor ended up moving to another store. Not sure if it was because of all the shagging or a promotion. I never found out. Story 19. This is the main storyline of my adult life. Short version. I slept with my boss while she was still dating the president of the company. Longer version. Let's call her Virginia. Soon after she hired me, we became fast friends because we shared many of the same interests, and we were the only ones in our company of 25 that were overly obsessed with politics. She was a natural teacher, and I was an apt pupil. At the time she was living with her boyfriend, who was the president of the company, and she was his VP, who owned 20% of the company. Their relationship was ending, and he was traveling a lot. He was out of town on 4th of July, so we made plans to spend 4th of July together so she wouldn't be alone on her favorite holiday. We ended up sleeping that night. It was okay, but good enough that she let me spend the night. She eventually moved into her own place, and we kept it physical for almost a year. We eventually started to secretly date and even moved in together. 4 years later the company became bigger. I became a partner. We were discussing marriage, so we decided to come clean to our president, her ex-boyfriend. We did, and we broke up 6 months later. Kept hooking up for another 2 years while we dated others. She moved, got engaged and married. I proposed to my girlfriend, now my wife, the day after her wedding which we attended. I have a 2-year-old. She is pregnant. We still work together. It all worked out pretty well. Story 20. At my previous employer I was working as an inventory auditor. The store I was at was considered an A, which meant it made 100+ million per year in total sales. My boss, we'll call her Misty, was a lady who hired on with this company in high school and never looked back. She'd been there for something like 18 years and really knew her crap. So much so that when other stores got new audit supervisors, she would be sent there to train those people. When a new store opened up a couple hours south of us, the high-ups that ran the market decided that it needed a few extra people to get audit/claims/receiving up and running. She was asked to pick one of her people and head down there for a couple weeks. Later that afternoon she gave me a call and asked if I would be up for traveling. I said sure. She told me about the job and the schedule, got all the details ironed out, and we headed down that Sunday afternoon. So, Misty was in her late 30s, on husband number 2 and kid number 2. She had a reputation as someone who was really, really hard to get along with. She was the proverbial pit bull in a skirt and heels. We'd never really been close by any means. I came in to work every day and did my job, went home and didn't think anything else of it. We did, however, complement each other at work very well. The things I was good at were usually her weaknesses, and vice versa. So after a couple days of working with total strangers we started having breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. By Wednesday we were heading back to the hotel when she asked me if I wanted to come hang out by the pool with her. I did. We talked, joked around, listened to music and had a great time. At dinner later that night we had a few drinks, flirted a tiny bit, and ended up saying goodnight with a hug. This went on for the rest of the trip like a daily ritual. Every day it got a little more flirty. We decided to split a huge bottle of Malibu for some rum and cokes at the pool that Saturday night, as Sunday was our day off. We had been at the pool for a couple hours when I told her I had a crazy question to ask. She didn't even let me finish, and we went up to her room immediately. Didn't really get me any further with the company, but I did get the maximum raise every year after that. Story 21. I didn't sleep with her, and that cost me my job. She was the boss who had a thing for me, and one night she showed up at my house, after I was already 3 sheets in the wind. It was my day off. She started drinking and then told me she wanted to do it. I had the presence of mind to say no, because you don't poop where you eat. Next day at work, she's being a real biss to me. I ask her what the heck is going on. She says if I had just slept with her, she could see to it that I would be promoted. I had a talk with HR about it. They asked me to write a statement, which I did. I knew that she would have to write a statement as well, but what I didn't know is that she was allowed to read mine before she wrote hers. I asked for the same courtesy to read her statement, and I was told that I wasn't allowed to. That afternoon, my district manager called and told me that he was transferring me to another store. A lower volume store which cost me income. I complained about it and was told to deal with it. I quit. This is the first time I've relayed that story. I would have pursued legal action, but it was the early 90s and who the heck was going to believe that a guy could be SA'd? Plus, there was no way she was going to be fired, it was made clear. So, if I had stayed with the company, our paths would have to cross again. I think I made the right choice. Story 22. So, I slept with my boss. It wasn't exactly planned. One night, the team was out for drinks, and we ended up sharing a cab. Somewhere along the ride, she casually told the driver to drop us both off at her place. I wasn't about to argue. She was a gorgeous older woman, and I was more than happy to go along with it. Things got interesting after that. We both realized it might be a bit awkward to continue working so closely, so I transferred to another department soon after. What I didn't expect was the surprise that came with the transfer, a raise and a shiny new title. I slept with her because she was a hot older woman. The raise I got later was unexpected. Story 23. Not my boss, technically, and not for a promotion/raise, but I did sleep with a person who had a deciding voice about an opportunity that I wanted. I had planned on pursuing this opportunity independently. Let's just say it was about the release of a product. We had an affair for about a year and I presented my product for the opportunity. It was accepted and he had a role in the decision. I'm very proud of having my product accepted and it's one of the top 3 accomplishments of my life. But when I'm feeling bad about myself, this doubt creeps over me that it was just because of my relationship with a gatekeeper that it was accepted. I know it would have gotten through anyway, as it's exactly in line with what this company seeks, and I had a good relationship with the company other than having a physical relationship with someone in it, but it did sort of cast some doubt on this thing that I'm really, really proud of. Without the affair, the whole experience would have been a lot less fraught. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.